Hello, gather round because what I'm about to tell you will absolutely blow your mind. I'm Jetset Jeremy, and I'm speaking to you from my lovely home here in the States, with my lovely wife and dogs and wild kids, but my heart's still very much with the old continent. And blimey, what's happening across Europe right now is nothing short of extraordinary. I left Britain years ago, but I've been keeping a very close eye on what's happening back home and across the Channel. And let me tell you, the Europe I knew growing up is transforming before our very eyes. We're talking about a complete about-face on immigration policies that would make even the most hardened politicians' heads spin. Now I know what you're thinking. Jeremy, didn't Europe used to welcome everyone with open arms? Well, that's exactly the point. Something massive has shifted, and countries that once rolled out the red carpet are now quite literally rolling it back up and showing people the door. Picture this scenario for a moment. You're watching the news, sipping your morning tea, and suddenly you see headlines about Denmark sending asylum seekers to Rwanda, Sweden conducting school raids to find undocumented children, and France dismantling migrant camps faster than you can say fish and chips. It sounds like something from a dystopian novel, doesn't it? But this is happening right now. The numbers alone are staggering. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of deportations, billions of euros spent on border walls, and policies so strict they'd make Victorian workhouse overseers blush. But here's the thing that really gets me thinking. This isn't happening in isolation. It's a coordinated response to what many Europeans see as an immigration crisis that spiraled completely out of control. Let me paint you a picture of what's really going on. Imagine you're running a small pub in a quaint English village. You've always prided yourself on welcoming travellers, offering them a warm meal and a place to rest. But then, year after year, more and more people start showing up. Soon, you're completely overwhelmed. Your regular customers can't find seats, your kitchen can't keep up with demand, and your staff is burning out. Eventually, you'd have to make some tough decisions, wouldn't you? That's essentially what's happened across Europe, but on a massive scale. Countries that once celebrated their humanitarian values are now grappling with the practical realities of housing, feeding, and integrating millions of newcomers, while their own citizens struggle with housing shortages, strained public services, and rising crime rates in certain areas. Before we continue, if you're connecting to public Wi-Fi without a VPN while sipping your airport cappuccino, blissfully ignoring all the problems in the world, you're basically inviting an unfriendly stranger to read your emails. I use NordVPN to avoid that kind of intimacy, just saying. Let's start with Denmark. Now, I've always had a soft spot for the Danes. Lovely people, excellent pastries, and they gave us Hamlet after all. But their current approach would make even the most stoic Viking raise an eyebrow. They've essentially outsourced their asylum system to Rwanda. It's like ordering takeaway, but instead of getting your curry delivered, you're sending your problems halfway around the world. The Danish government signed a €250 million deal to process asylum claims in Rwanda. Critics call it deportation outsourcing, which, let's be honest, sounds like something a particularly ruthless corporate executive might come up with. But the Danes argue it's about deterrence and saving lives at sea. The numbers tell a fascinating story though. In 2024, Denmark approved only 800 asylum applications. To put that in perspective, Sweden approved 20,000. It's like comparing a trickle to a waterfall. In addition though, Denmark has introduced what they call integration zones. Sounds rather pleasant, doesn't it? Like a wellness retreat or a community garden project. But the reality is far more complex. Immigrants from non-Western backgrounds must live in these designated areas and attend language and culture classes before they can move freely around the country. Miss the program and you risk deportation. It's created quite the controversy, with human rights groups warning about the creation of a two-tier society. Now, let's hop over to Italy, shall we? Beautiful country, fantastic food, and home to some of the world's most stunning art. But Italy has found itself on the front lines of Europe's migration challenge. The numbers are absolutely mind-boggling. In 2024 alone, 180,000 migrants arrived by sea. That's a 60% increase from the previous year. Imagine trying to process and house that many people arriving at your doorstep. it would be like the entire population of a decent-sized city suddenly showing up unannounced. The current Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, responded with what can only be described as the toughest plan Italy has ever implemented. They've signed a €1.5 billion deal with Albania to establish processing camps. It's like having a sorting facility, but for human beings seeking refuge. While asylum seekers wait for their cases to be processed, they stay outside Italian territory entirely. The government has also passed rapid deportation laws, aiming to remove 40,000 undocumented migrants in 2025. That's double what previous governments managed. The Italian approach includes some rather dramatic measures. The Coast Guard has seized over 1,200 migrant boats in just the first half of 2025. Even more controversially, NGOs that rescue people at sea now face heavy fines and potential jail time if they bring migrants to Italian shores. Officials argue this disrupts the smugglers' business model, but human rights groups warn it puts thousands of lives at risk. Moving north to Poland, we encounter a completely different and dramatic approach. Poland has taken perhaps the hardest line of all, triggered by its long border with Belarus. Warsaw accused Minsk of weaponizing migration, essentially using desperate people as political pawns to destabilize Poland and the broader European Union. It's a rather sinister game of human chess, if you will. Poland's response was swift and uncompromising. They built a €350 million high-tech wall stretching 400 kilometers. It's not just any wall, mind you. We're talking about a fortress-like barrier, complete with all the modern surveillance technology you could imagine. The results were immediate and dramatic. Illegal crossings collapsed by almost 80% in 2025. But the wall is just the beginning. Poland implemented emergency laws that eliminate the traditional asylum process entirely. If you're caught crossing illegally, there's no asylum claim, no appeal, no lengthy legal process. You're sent back the same day. It's immigration enforcement at lightning speed. They're running mass deportation flights, removing about 5,000 migrants every month. The scale is absolutely enormous, costing nearly €500 million this year alone. Finland presents another fascinating case study. Known for saunas, high living standards, and the Northern Lights, Finland has traditionally been seen as one of Europe's most peaceful and welcoming nations. But in 2025, they showed a very different face to the world. The Finnish government accused Russia of pushing thousands of migrants across the eastern border as a form of political pressure. It's another example of migration being used as a geopolitical weapon. In response, Finland made the extraordinary decision to shut their entire eastern border and began construction of a 200-kilometer fence. This isn't just any fence. We're talking about a €400 million project complete with drones, motion sensors, and infrared cameras. It's like something from a science fiction film. Deportations in Finland have doubled. In 2025 alone, it was reported that over 10,000 migrants were expelled, compared to only 5,000 just 2 years earlier. They've also introduced what they call express deportations. If you cross illegally, you can be removed within 48 hours. No lengthy process, no asylum review, just a quick turnaround back to wherever you came from. But perhaps the most shocking aspect of Finland's new approach is how they're treating people already living in the country. More than 5,000 residence permits have been revoked, targeting Afghans, Iraqis, and Somalis. Officials claim these countries are now safe enough for return, though many would dispute that assessment. Even foreigners with minor criminal convictions now face deportation, with removals of foreign offenders rising by 300%. Sweden's transformation is perhaps the most dramatic of all. This is the country that was once praised as Europe's most welcoming and happiest nation. Between 2015 and 2023, Sweden took in more than 1.2 million refugees. For years, they were held up as a model of humanitarian values and progressive immigration policies. But by 2024, the system was clearly breaking down. Gang violence was rising dramatically, with Sweden recording approximately 1,300 shootings that year alone, many linked to areas with high immigrant populations. Public pressure forced the government's hand. leading to what they call Operation Clean Sweden. The ambitious goal was to deport 50,000 undocumented migrants by the end of 2025. Social benefits for undocumented people have been completely eliminated. No more free housing, no healthcare, no welfare payments. Immigration courts now fast-track deportations, giving people just 30 days to leave voluntarily before forced removal. The most controversial aspect of Sweden's new approach involves entire families being deported, even when some children were born in Sweden. In a move that would shock anyone familiar with Sweden's traditional values, deportation officers are now entering schools to identify undocumented children. It's a policy that has split the country down the middle and drawn international criticism. Germany, the heart of Europe, and once the symbol of open doors, has also undergone a dramatic transformation. Since 2015, Germany accepted more than 2 million refugees, earning praise for what was called their welcome culture. But by 2024, the system had reached a breaking point. Supporting asylum seekers now costs nearly 50 billion euros every year. That's an enormous burden on taxpayers, roughly equivalent to the GDP of a small European nation. Deportations surged to over 60,000 people in 2025, the highest number since World War II. That represents a 50% increase compared to just 2 years earlier. Germany has introduced fast-track deportations, reducing the process from months to just 2 weeks. They've also cut benefits to encourage voluntary returns, leading more than 20,000 migrants to leave on their own in 2025. Foreign offenders have become the top priority, with over 10,000 people with criminal records expelled in just the first half of 2025. The enforcement has become increasingly visible and controversial. Police began conducting deportation raids in refugee shelters, train stations, and even schools. Human rights groups call it a violation of European values, but national surveys show 74% of Germans support the crackdown. But nothing quite compares to what's happening in France. The numbers are truly staggering and represent the largest scale operation of its kind in modern European history. France has one of the largest immigrant populations in Europe, with more than 7 million people, representing about 10% of the total population. After years of rising crime, riots, and terrorist attacks, the French government decided in 2024 that drastic action was necessary. The message was blunt and uncompromising. France must be for the French first. In 2025, France carried out approximately 100,000 deportations, almost double the previous year. This represents the largest mass removal in modern French history. The new zero-tolerance program means anyone without legal papers faces immediate deportation. No appeals, no second chances, no lengthy legal processes. But it goes even further than that. Even legal residents can be expelled if authorities decide they pose a threat to public order. It's an extraordinarily broad interpretation of deportation powers. The enforcement has been swift and comprehensive. Police have dismantled 50 migrant camps in major cities like Paris, Marseille, and Calais. Families who had lived there for years were put on buses and sent back to their home countries. In just 6 months, France deported 15,000 foreign criminals, including gang members and suspected extremists. The human impact of these policies is enormous. Critics describe it as a humanitarian disaster, arguing that France is abandoning its fundamental values of liberty and equality. But public support remains strong, with polls showing 78% of French citizens backing the crackdown. What makes this transformation even more remarkable is how quickly it's spread across the continent. Countries are learning from each other, adopting similar policies, and creating what amounts to a new European consensus on immigration. Denmark's Rwanda model, Italy's Albania processing centres, Poland's instant deportations, and France's mass removals are all being watched closely by other governments. The question that haunts me, watching this unfold, is whether this represents a temporary swing of the pendulum or a permanent transformation of European values. Are we witnessing the necessary protection of European societies, or the abandonment of humanitarian principles that took decades to establish? The financial costs alone are staggering. We're talking about billions of euros being spent on walls, processing centres, deportation flights, and enforcement operations. The human costs are equally significant, with families being separated, children being removed from schools they've attended for years, and people being sent back to countries they barely remember. But supporters argue that Europe had no choice. They point to housing shortages, strained public services, rising crime in certain areas, and the simple mathematics of trying to integrate millions of new arrivals while maintaining social cohesion and economic stability. What fascinates me most is how this represents a complete reversal of the narrative we've been hearing for decades. Europe was supposed to be moving toward greater integration, more open borders, and increased humanitarian cooperation. Instead, we're seeing the return of fortress-like mentalities and policies that prioritize national identity over international solidarity. The ripple effects of these changes will be felt for generations. Children who grew up thinking of themselves as Swedish, German, or French may find themselves deported to countries they don't know. Asylum seekers who might have once found refuge in Europe may now face processing in distant countries or immediate deportation. Let's talk about something nobody budgets for: getting hacked in a hotel lobby. When you travel, your data is exposed. Every time you log into a bank account, check your email, or book a flight over unsecured Wi-Fi. That's why I use NordVPN. It encrypts my connection, cloaks my digital footprint, and even lets me access websites and streaming services as if I were back home or anywhere else I choose. It's not just about security, it's about digital freedom. Plus, I often find better prices by comparing regions. Some airlines show different rates depending on where you're browsing from. NordVPN makes that kind of comparison possible. So if you're traveling without a VPN, you're not saving money, you're leaving it on the table. Use my link below for a serious discount and travel like someone who knows how the internet works. From my perspective here in America, who maybe have even bigger issues, watching this European transformation unfold, it raises uncomfortable questions about the future of Western liberal values. Are these policies a necessary correction to overly permissive immigration systems, or are they the beginning of a darker chapter in European history? The numbers speak for themselves. From Denmark's 800 asylum approvals to France's 100,000 deportations, we're witnessing the most dramatic shift in European immigration policy since World War II. Whether this leads to greater stability and security or creates new forms of injustice and suffering remains to be seen. What's clear is that the Europe today looks nothing like the Europe of 10 or 15 years ago. The question now is whether this transformation will prove sustainable, effective, and morally defensible in the long run. Only time will tell if Europe's new approach represents a wise policy adjustment or a tragic abandonment of its humanitarian heritage. So there you have it, my thoughts on this absolutely extraordinary transformation happening across Europe. I probably need to make another video soon about the distressing things happening in my two home nations, the UK and the USA, but it depresses me too much, so I will need a moment. What do you think about all this? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more uplifting videos. Cheers.